Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and this is the XDuoo TA20 Plus. This is a fully balanced hybrid tube headphone amplifier that comes in with an MSRP of $499 US. This was a kind loan to me from Apos Audio. Apos has asked nothing in return other than a fair and honest evaluation of this product, as well as an affiliate link to where you can buy this from them down in the description below. So that's what you're going to get. So the link that you see in the description for Apos to buy this will be an affiliate link. So far, I have used affiliate link money only to support the channel, to support things like lights, microphones, other materials like that, or cover shipping costs. And as always, I will give you my honest thoughts on this without regard to whether or not it is going to sell. But I like this one, okay? So I'm going to explain to you why, and yeah, we actually might be here for a little bit because there's a lot of ground to cover, including tube rolling and talking about where this fits in the market amongst other hybrids around the price, and where it just fits in that mid-fi amplifier category since it's a $500 US headphone amp. So let's do shameless self-promotion, and then we will get into all of that.
Hi, I'm Wave Theory's human companion, and he wants you to know that your support of this YouTube channel helps keep the reviews coming. If you enjoy Wave Theory's honest, thorough style, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the links in the description below to sign up for the Patreon or send him a tip through PayPal. All right, enjoy the musings.
The TA20 Plus is a hybrid amplifier, and so what that means is that it combines both vacuum tube stages and solid state stages in the signal path. Usually that means that the vacuum tube stage, or at least in most hybrid designs, the vacuum tube stage is the preamplifier section, and then there is a solid state amplifier section here. Now, this cage thing here pops off. I will show you this in the build here a little bit. But we see three tubes on this one right in here. We've got this bigger tube right here in the middle, which is a rectifier tube. And that, I believe, is on the power supply path. I will talk more about that in a minute. And then we have two 12AU7 vacuum tubes here that are like the sonic flavoring tubes that I think, again, are on the preamplifier path. And then we have a Class A transistor-based headphone amplifier in here that is spec'd to output up to 2600 milliwatts per channel from the balanced outputs, okay, into a 32 ohm load, and then the single-ended headphone output is spec'd to put out 2000 milliwatts per channel also into a 32 ohm load. All right, so with those bit of specs out of the way, and again, this is a balanced amplifier, so it has two kind of close to independent signal paths after the power supply in here for the audio signal. So it is balanced, and so if that is of interest to you, here it is on that. But with those specs and that design out of the way, what we're going to do here in a minute is I'm going to zoom in closer on this thing and show you some of the aspects of the build that stand out. There's a little bit of a build quirk in there that may be familiar if you are familiar with the brand Shit. Okay, and so I will show you that here as well in just a moment. And then we'll come back on the other side. We'll talk about test gear, we'll talk about sound, we'll talk tube rolling, and we'll talk about where this thing fits in the market. So there is a lot to discuss here, so I will timestamp this video out, so make sure you use those timestamps to jump around and watch the things that are of most interest or relevance to you. But with that, let's go ahead and cut to a view where I show you the close-up of the build of this thing. We'll do unit tour this way because I think it's easier to see the piece holding the camera steady, and then I'll just move this thing around up here while it's on there. So here is the front panel, and what we see is this big box right here behind there, and this is like a thin, I think that feels like plastic to me. A plastic cover over the power supply transformer, I believe, is back in here. All right, and then here on the front, this is an aluminum faceplate, I believe, kind of this gunmetal gray color going on here. And we see that we have two flavors of balanced headphone output, 4-pin XLR and then 4.4 millimeter Pentacon. Here is the 6.35 millimeter / 1/4 inch single-ended headphone output. Then we just have this kind of retro cool VU meter in here. And yes, this really does work. When you put a music signal through here and all of that, you will see this needle bounce back and forth. It's pretty cool. It doesn't really do anything for the sound. It's just this nice little aesthetic touch that kind of gives this thing this retro cool feel. Not so retro is the digital volume control. So we have LED display here that is just the volume level. The potentiometer has 99 positions, I guess technically 100 when you count 0 in here. And you see that you can change it slow, you can change it fast, okay? So actually that works pretty well. The volume knob here, big and red, also doubles as an input switcher. I cycle through the 3 inputs, which I will show you on the back in a moment. Now, the feel of the volume knob, it is clicky. So, I mean, there's a little click every time you see the volume number change a little bit. And it's a little splashy feeling. It also is like endlessly turning. So you see I'm below 0 here and it's just still turning. A little splashy to the touch, a little bit wobbly up, down, side to side a little bit. So this could be a little bit higher quality feel, but it's not bad. It's not a deal breaker or anything like that. Okay, the tubes are behind this little cage here, but that cage does come right off. Just lift it up, pull it out there, and we see that it has basically banana plugs. Focus camera. Okay, banana plugs at the 4 corners that go into corresponding holes up here to hold that into place. I honestly prefer the look without this cage thing on it, but there's an ergonomic reason why you might want to leave the cage on there, which we'll talk about in just a second. But what we have here is a rectifier tube, which is a 5.4ZP, I forgot. I will put it down in the description what kind of thing that is. I did not mess with this one. Rectifier tube to me means that I believe it is on the power supply portion of the circuit. Okay, because when I hear rectifier, I think of converting incoming AC power to DC to actually power the amp. So I think that's what's going on here. All right, these are 12AU7 tubes here, and those are the preamp tubes, basically. Those are what give this thing its tube sound in its hybrid tube nature. All right, I'm going to turn the unit around here in just a moment and then show you the back panel. All right, round back, we will again work left to right. What we have here is a single-ended RCA stereo pair of outputs. So this is like a pre-out that you can run through the vacuum tubes and get a preamplifier output of this if you wanted to go to a set of powered speakers or you have a second amp or something like that that you want to run to. There it is. 2 single-ended stereo RCA inputs here, and then a balanced 3-pin XLR stereo analog input in here as well. This is a fully balanced architecture, best I can tell. So if you have the balanced connections to use, I would say use them. Not a huge deal if you use these. It's just you're going to have a little bit of conversion going from that to the balanced nature in here. Now, having the balanced connections, I think, does give this an advantage in terms of matching to DACs, because so many of the DACs around the price that you might want to think about matching this to are balanced, and they sound better from their balanced outputs than they do their single-ended outputs. I've been harping on that for a while. It's not that balanced is inherently better than single-ended. It's not. It's just that so many of the options out there are balanced, and thus because they are made balanced, sound better used well balanced. But having this balanced input here allows you a lot more DAC matching options, so I think that is good. Then we have standard power plug here, which I have it plugged in so you can see the tubes lit up all nice and pretty. And then they did a shit move, okay? And I mean shit as in the company name, SCHIIT. They put the power switch on the back. Okay, and this is what I was talking about a moment ago about why you might want to use this cage here over the tubes, because you do need to be able to reach back around behind the unit to be able to turn it on and off, right? And yeah, there's really no other way to turn the tubes on and off. And so, I mean, vacuum tubes, they have a limited life. Limited usually meaning like 10 to 12,000 hours of use, okay? So that is a lot of use. But you will chew through 10 to 12,000 hours a lot faster if you never turn off the unit and just leave those on and running all of the time. That's not particularly dangerous to do so, even though you can, even with this cage over top here, you know, they're just basically like incandescent light bulbs just sitting there glowing all the time in terms of heat output and all of that. But again, you'll chew through your tube life a lot faster if you don't give them breaks. My practice with a tube amp is when I know I'm going to be listening to a tube device, not just an amp, a tube amp, tube DAC, whatever, a tube device, I come down here, I turn it on, and then I go, you know, get a drink or, you know, get my work organized or whatever it is that I need to do, and then just let this stay on, and then the tubes stay on during the day until I know that I am done for the day, and then I will turn them off overnight or until the next time that I use them. To do that with this device, you have to reach around and flip this here from on this switch on the back. So one of the advantages that this cage deal has then, I'll stick that back on, is if in your setup you have to reach around from this side, this will prevent you from like burning your wrist or your hand or something on the tube. Okay, it's not going to be a serious burn. It doesn't get that hot if you touch them, but it will let you know that it happened. Okay. So anyway, I would have liked to have seen either the power switch on the front or just a way to deactivate the tubes from the front. I'm not aware of one. So I think that is an ergonomic ding right there. All right. But other than that, it's a well-built unit. It's got some heft to it, like the metal on this, on the sides and all that feels pretty nice quality, all of that. My only real complaint there is just really kind of how the volume knob feels a little bit splashy, but that's not a big deal. All right, let's go back to me on camera talking about sound. Test gear that I use to evaluate this amplifier here. Let's start with the sources. So I use Roon, where I play either local, or stream lossless or high-res FLAC files either locally or stream from Qobuz. And then I will also play local DSD files as well through Roon. Roon endpoints that I use were mostly my Sonor Ultra Rendu streamer, pretty trusty at this point, run through a Singer SU6 DDC, and then in turn through I think 3 different DACs got used on this thing. One would be the Gishelli Labs J2S DAC with the Sparkos op amps in it. That's the 4493 version. Another would be the Schiit Bifrost 2/64. And then I also pulled out my high-end DAC, the Berkeley Alpha Series 2, to see if I would gain anything by matching this to a really high-end DAC like that. Headphones used, also a variety. Beyerdynamic DT880 600 ohm that I have balanced modded so that I can plug it into the balanced outputs of these things, or of balanced amps. Massdrop plus Sennheiser HD6XX. Right, the FIO FT3 350 ohm version that I just reviewed. I'll put a link to that as well as all of these headphones I'm about to name down in the description, but that was a very recent review. That got used on here a fair amount. I also tried the HiFiMan Ananda Nano, the HiFiMan Aria Organic, the HiFiMan HE1000 SE, and I tried the HE6 SE-V2 on this thing as well, also from HiFiMan, because that is a really hard headphone to drive. Just wanted to see if this could handle it. So that's a good transition to talk about. Let's just mention briefly the kinds of headphones that this thing is good at amplifying. And one of the advantages of this being a hybrid tube design is that it works with a wider range of headphones. If you buy an output transformerless tube amp or an OTL tube amp out there, like the Dark Voice, or there's an XDuoo that's close to a Dark Voice clone that is out there, that's one of those, or the Bottlehead Crack, Felix Echo, Hagerman Tuba. I think that's true about the Hagerman Tuba. You know, there's several of those out there that do not have output transformers, and so they are basically, you're almost required, not for safety reasons or because you're going to blow anything up, but for sonic reasons and damping factor and all of that. You want to use those with really high impedance headphones like the 250 or 600 ohm Beyerdynamics, or the 300 ohm Sennheisers, the 350 ohm FIO FT3, the 300 ohm ZMFs, you know, things of that nature. And while those are all excellent headphones in their own way, that's just a limited pool of headphones that you can really use effectively with that kind of an amp. The hybrid design here opens up the world to basically any kind of headphone out there that's not an electrostat. Low impedance dynamics works fine here. Planars of any impedance mostly, until you get really extreme, work on here as well. Okay, and that's because the amplifier, again, is a solid state, I'm pretty sure Class A amplifier in this thing. So it's like plugging it into the solid state amp of like a Lake People G111 or, you know, a Topping or a THX amp, even though that's a different topology, all of that. Like, okay, it opens the door to using those kinds of things. So let's talk about headphone drivability here and the power output. Basically everything that I plugged into it. I failed to mention my Focal Utopia original. That was in here too. Okay, but basically everything that I plugged into this thing worked well from a drivability standpoint. I really didn't have any issues jumping out about this not having the power to drive most things, with one exception. The HE6 SEV2 sounded decent on this amplifier. It sounded better than it does from my G111 Mark II, okay, from some other mid-fi amps that I have tried it on, but it's still not quite there with that headphone. So if you have one of those, this amp is not terrible to use with the HE6 SEV2, but I still think there's some unlocked potential that this just doesn't quite have the power to bring out of that headphone. Again, getting close, just not quite there. But everything else, like the 600 ohm DT880, had to turn the potentiometer on this up to about 94 to 95 out of 99 on a lot of program material to get to my like 72, 73 dB average listening level. So you're kind of running out of headroom a little bit, you would think. But like the cannon fire and just the overall busyness of a track like the 1812 Overture from Eric Kunzel and the Cincinnati Pops, where you've got a full orchestra, a full vocal choir, a full bell choir, and real cannon fire going off all at the same time, even with the 600 ohm DT880 at volume level like 95 out of 99, somewhere right around in there, this actually did okay and held it together without a ton of distortion going on. There's going to be distortion on that cannon fire because that's the way it's recorded, but other than that, it seems to hold it together pretty well. So it's got decent enough power for that headphone, even in some pretty extreme extreme material, up to about a 75 dB AV volume level. Okay, so that's good there. Low impedance dynamics and all of that, those work fine too. Planars that are not extremely hard to drive like the HE6 SEV2 is, those also sounded good on here too. So the drivability, its hybrid design works in terms of it being able to work with a wide selection of headphones and headphone types. Okay, on with the sound then. The sound on this amp, let's start with the perceived frequency response, the tone, the tonality and that sort of thing. It is a little bit variable because of the ability to tube roll. And I did try some different tubes in here. We'll get to that in a little bit. So nailing down one specific tone on this and describing that is just kind of a fool's errand because it's going to change. You can tweak it a little bit to the way you like it. That said, most of the tube rolling that I did here, again, I didn't do a ton, but I did some. Like the tube rolling that I did here always stayed within the realm of neutral, and it just kind of varied a little bit on like how much warmth was there versus how much brightness was there in terms of perceived frequency response and tonality kinds of things. But it's still more neutral than it isn't, again, regardless of the tubes that I tried with it. So it's really more of like the presentational aspects where this amp's true flavor comes out. And even with these, you can tweak them a little bit, but I'm going to do my best to describe just this amp's nature on its own, regardless of what kind of tube you put in here. So again, the perceived frequency response is still going to be mostly neutral. I would see it difficult to like swing wildly into super warm or dark or super bright and piercing. You'll move in the direction of those things with tube rolling and all of that. But one thing that does come out pretty consistently is that this is a pretty smooth, laid back kind of presentation in the sound of this amp. The other thing that I notice is that the perceived distance from listener, so from my head to where music was coming from, was pushed back a little bit. So it's a bit of like a more laid back, smooth kind of presentation to begin with, and then also kind of pushes the sound away from you. Not hugely so, but it is a little bit noticeable to me when I do comparisons with others that it just sounds like the sound is just a little bit farther away from me, which is neither good nor bad. It's just a preference thing. It also generally has a wide-ish but not huge soundstage to go with it. Like that kind of held up across tube rolling as well. Okay, so what I mean by kind of smooth and like relaxed and kind of a sound here, like there's not a ton of dynamics. It's not devoid of things like punch or slam in the low end or snappy mid-range is like, quick, bursts of like a snare drum, those snaps that you get there. Like it's not devoid of those things, but they're not the stars of the show. They are brought back just a little bit in there. So again, I'll get a bit more relaxed and smooth kind of presentation with that. Okay, that does, again, vary a little bit with tube. More on that coming, but just generally it is a smoother, more relaxed kind of presentation here. Okay, and then again, the soundstage, big-ish. You can change the holography, the imaging, and the separation in between there with tubes, but generally the soundstage is wide-ish, but not enormous. Okay, all that. There is definitely bigger out there. There's also smaller out there, all right, in terms of that. Okay. But that's like what I can tell you about like the sound of this thing, like tube independent, is that it's going to be mostly neutral. It's not going to really wander to an extreme on the tonality and the perceived frequency response, although you can tweak it a little bit with tube. Okay, it's going to be a more relaxed, kind of smooth sound to it. It's not going to be overly dynamic, punchy, or energetic from like a physicality or pacing kind of standpoint. Okay, it's going to, the sound stage is wide-ish, but it also feels a little bit farther away than some amplifiers I've heard around this price point too. And again, that's not a criticism. I'm not giving that as a positive or a negative. That's just the presentation of this thing. All right, so I think it's at this point where we're going to turn towards the tube rolling experience that I had, because that will give you a little bit more sense of like what this thing actually sounds like in there, because subtle things like texturing, resolution, the imaging and the separation, and then to a degree the amount to which the dynamics do come out and all of that do change with tube. So let's cut to tube rolling stuff. All right, I tried two flavors of aftermarket vacuum tubes in the TA20 Plus. On the left here, we have the PS Vane Art Series 12AU7-S. These I bought right off of Amazon. As of the filming of this video, they are about $76 US for a matched pair. And I will go ahead and put a link in the description to Amazon where you can buy those, and that will be an affiliate link. But I have no connection to PS Vane, so they have no idea that I'm doing this or anything like that. So the unfiltered opinion from me, as you often get anyway. All right, and then here on the right, we have the Apos Ray tubes. This is a new launch from Apos. I am working on a separate review for their Ray tubes because they sent me these 12AU7s and matched pair, and also they have their 6SN7 variant of the Ray tubes en route to me right now, so I'm looking forward to getting that as well. All right. These Ray tubes, if you buy them separately from the 12A or from the TA20 Plus, they are about $180 US. If you buy them bundled with the TA20 Plus, right from Apos there, they will knock the price down to these into two combined. The amp and these tubes together will be about $648 and change, so just shy of $650 US on that. So that's a total of 3 different types of tubes. The stock XDuos that are currently in the unit I tried, and then these. What did I gain by going to these aftermarket tubes? All right, first of all, the stock tubes are just kind of right? They're functional. The unit sounds decent with them. The description on Apos's website about the sound of the amplifier itself is that it is warm and smooth. And as you heard my sound description, I kind of agree with that, but I think some of the perception of that smoothness and softness, they also mentioned softness, but some of this perception of the smoothness and the softness comes from those stock tubes in there, right? Because they're okay. They're not super crisp or clear. They don't have a ton of clarity. They kind of blend the sound together and kind of give it that stereotypical tubey wetness to it, where it's just all kind of this kind of blended together sound, and instruments and vocals and all of that are not always that well separated from each other, and then spatial separation is not always the best either. Still a fine sounding amplifier. I'm not saying that those XDuoo stock tubes are bad or that they perform poorly, but you are definitely leaving some sonic performance on the table by not getting a tube upgrade. So let's talk about these two upgraded tube options that I tried here. The PS vanes here, they maintain a lot of the warmth and fullness of the sound that comes from the stock tubes, but they clean it up a lot. It's a lot cleaner. The noise floor drops noticeably. There's a lot more clarity to the sound, and then it also becomes a lot more like well separated and holographic in the spatial presentation. There's a bit of upper treble air roll off with these tubes, so they are not particularly bright or aggressive in the top end, and they are a lot punchier. They have a lot more dynamic impact and like a fun liveliness to them than the stock tubes do. Still not enough to make this like a really punchy, active, energetic, dynamic kind of amplifier. It just generally has a more laid back and smooth kind of presentation to it. But the dynamics do step forward on the PS vanes as compared to the stock tubes to a noticeable degree. I really liked the PS vane tubes in there with this unit. I thought it struck a good balance of that tube smoothness and fullness and yes, warmth, but also still having a lot of the technicalities to go with it. That increased resolution, a lower noise floor, a more holographic spatial presentation, and better overall separation. So instruments did not blend together quite as much. Vocals didn't blend together quite as much. Instruments and vocals didn't blend together quite as much. They were all separated and given their own space to operate while still creating a nice coherent presentation. All right, the Ray tubes here, the Apos branded Ray tubes, I don't know their origin. I will try to track that down, and if I can learn it, I will report on that when I come around to the full review of the Ray tubes in the not distant future. They emphasize the top end a little bit more. They are the least warm of the three tube options that you see here. They have a little bit of brightness to them, not sharpness. I didn't notice a whole lot of sibilance or all that, but there's just more treble energy, particularly in the air frequencies, the really high treble up there with the Rays. And then also a little bit through the lower mids, like hi-hats and cymbals also have a little bit more energy to them as well. Just a little bit more, I don't want to say sizzle because that makes it sound like the tonal balance is poor, and it's not, but there's just a little bit more energy, a little bit more forwardness on things like hi-hats and cymbals and that sort of thing through the Ray tubes. The Ray tubes do the best job of spatial separation here. Like, they do the best job with this amp of the tubes that you see here of putting space between sonic images and that sort of thing. And then also, like, because of that, there's this just slight increase in clarity. Couple of things I should say. The increased spatial separation, just a hair over what the PS vanes do, and then the less warmth. So there's just a little less fullness through the mid bass with the Rays than there is the PS vanes here. Those two combined create a perception of additional clarity coming through the Rays. Now, I did not notice any extra resolution from the Rays over the PS vanes through the TA20 The level of resolution was about dead even there. It's just that the Rays will initially present as being more resolving because the frequency range that they emphasize just kind of gives that a little bit more perceived clarity. It just sounds a little bit more resolving and cleaner, even though all of the details are still there. Now, the rays are also on the smoother side from a dynamic standpoint. They don't hit particularly hard and all of that. They also don't have the greatest of bass extension. I think the PS vanes are a little bit stronger in bass extension. Why could I just not say that word there? Okay, bass extension and just a little bit more oomph in the low end generally that the rays don't have. So a little bit different sound, like a more technical kind of sound from the rays than from the PS vanes, and certainly more than from the stock tubes. I could happily listen to either the PS vane or the rays here. I think for my personal listening preferences, the PS vane is a little bit better balance for me through this amp. I'm not saying that they're the better tubes generally. I'm just saying that the match to this amplifier, particularly because it brings out the dynamics a little bit more impactful and energetic, lively kind of sound dynamically, not from a frequency response standpoint, but just dynamically. Okay, the physicality of it. I enjoy that aspect of sound, and I listen to like a lot of hi-fi men headphones and that sort of thing that need a little bit of help sometimes in that department. And that, I think, for hi-fi men's and all that, I listen to a lot of Sennheiser's Beyerdynamics, that sort of thing. The PS vane tubes, their added dynamics and liveliness help them out. My Focal Utopia actually sounds pretty good through this amp, and it appreciated the increased clarity and overall sense of cleanliness from the rays, and it's already a really dynamic headphone, so I didn't notice the rays being less dynamic hurting the overall presentation there as a whole. Okay. So those are some thoughts on the tubes that I tried, and then the tubes will kind of come back when we get into comparisons with this and my Lake People G111 amp, because the way that this amplifier compares to the G111 changes based on which tubes you put in there. So let's go ahead and jump to that. All right, as we turn our attention towards comparisons and talking about where this thing fits in the market, let's first state that these kind of mid-fi tube hybrid amplifiers are not super plentiful. The other ones that I can name offhand would be the Monoprice Monolith Liquid Platinum, which is normally about $800 US, but it very frequently goes on sale. I've seen it down as low as $400. Okay, so just if you're interested in that one, watch out for its price changes and fluctuations on all of that too. Okay, so that can be in here as a comparison to this. And then there's also the Shit Lyre series, which currently is up to the Lyre Plus, which is a single-ended only device that uses a 6SN7 tube in it. Okay, where does this stack up with those? I think it's been a long time since I've heard the Monolith Liquid Platinum. I owned that back several years ago now. At least 2 years ago, probably more than that would be the most recent time that I ever actually listened to it at this point. And then also the Shit Lyre Plus is now, I want to say, my review of that is probably over a year old now. So it's been a year since I've heard that amplifier as well. So some of the comparisons that I'm going to make here with those two are going to be just a little bit from memory, so they are not perfect, right? So keep that caveat in mind as we discuss this one. So my memory of the Liquid Platinum is that it's a little bit more mid-range forward in its presentation, and you can vary that a little bit also with tube rolling on that one. But it's just the mids, the vocal range and all of that is pushed forward just a little bit on that amplifier, which makes them stand out a little bit more than they do on this amp. But the Liquid Platinum also maintains or is similar in nature to it, just has a smoother, kind of more laid back kind of presentation than this one does most of the time, though my memory is that the low end on the Liquid Platinum is a little bit more robust than it is on this, both in terms of presence and in terms of impact, like slam and that sort of thing. But again, it's been a long time since I've heard that, so that may not be 100% accurate. That's just my recollection, just based on listening here. I do think overall that the Liquid Platinum is due for a refresh. It's a several-year-old model now, and its power output and all that, like it does not handle the HE6SE V2 nearly as well as the TA20 Plus does. So the TA20 Plus, I think, is a little bit more headphone friendly these days and will work with a wider range of headphones than the Monolith Liquid Platinum will anymore. And also, I think just because the XDuoo does not push the mids as far forward as the Liquid Platinum does at times, then like if you're already talking about a headphone that might be a little bit more mid forward for you, okay, the MLP is likely just to push that over the edge there. Now the Lyre Plus here, when you bring that in, is going to also be a little bit more money than this one. That's a $600 US unit without a tube. It's going to get closer to $700 by the time you get a decent tube in there. So a little bit more money than this one, but not by a lot. The Lyre Plus is also single-ended only. And that's not a problem in terms of sonic ceiling, like the ceiling of the sonic performance. Because honestly, I think the Lyre Plus probably has a higher performance ceiling than this one does. Just reaching that ceiling is more difficult with that headphone amp. Because it's single-ended only and only has single-ended connections on it, you're really limiting the number of DACs that you can meaningfully combine with that amp. Now, there are a few single-ended DACs around the price point. Mojo 2, Chord Mojo 2, Socris DAC 1421, the Black Ice Audio Glass FX come to mind immediately, but those are like the only three that I can name that are single-ended only that would make a good match to the Lyre 3 in terms of being single-ended. Whereas with the XDuoo here, you can use any of those three that I just mentioned and plug it into the single-ended input on this, and that's not going to do much, okay, at least not do much harmful. But you can also open that up to like, Shit Bifrost 2/64, Denafrips Aries 12th Anniversary Edition, the Musician Draco, the Gishelli Labs J2S with the, the new chip and Sparkos op amps and like all of that kind of stuff. Any kind of SMSL DAC or topping DAC, I don't recommend topping, but any of those others and all of that like have those balanced connections that you can match to this, and they're going to be a lot more matching friendly to this amp on there as well. I do think the Lyre 3 has a little bit more power and a little bit more control. Like it did well with the HE6SE V2. It had a little bit more headroom yet with the DT8 8600 ohm and that sort of thing. Okay, and I do think the overall performance ceiling on the Lyre Plus is higher, but again, it's just a little bit more money and it's not as system building flexible as the TA20 Plus is. So those are things just to keep in mind. Okay. Where does the TA20 Plus just fit in the mid-fi headphone amp market generally? So whether they're hybrid or not, how does it do? I have kept around the Lake People G111 Mark II, which I have a review of and I'll link down in the description as well, as kind of like my $600-ish reference, although I think it's selling for about $550 US anymore. And the observant among you will notice that it is not a tube amp. There are no vacuum tubes on this thing. It is a solid-state amplifier. But I've kept it around because it and the Lyre Plus to me were like the benchmarks in terms of performance at the mid-fi level for headphone amps. So I compared the XDuoo to this because again, they're close in price and all of that. How did it go? The how it went kind of varied a little bit with what tube I stuck in the XDuoo. With the stock XDuoo tubes, I did not think that the TA20 Plus was anywhere near close to the G111. I thought the G111 was superior in terms of technicalities and just sonic enjoyability and all of that than the TA20 Plus with its stock XDuoo tubes. However, you put the PS Vane tubes that I mentioned in the XDuoo here, and the tonality between the two, between the XDuoo and the G111 Mark II, becomes quite similar. The G111 is mostly neutral. It rolls off the upper air frequencies just a little bit, and it also has a very robust low end that's like lower than the warmth region, so it's like down in the true deep sub bass where this thing gets has some more fullness to it. And then it's also a very active, energetic, like forward and dynamically aggressive kind of amplifier. Like it'll really punch you, okay, in there. So with the PS Vane tubes, things like resolution, spatial holography, and all of that were like dead even, I thought, between these two, very close to each other. The Lake People definitely had a more aggressive and dynamic and lively presentation to it. The Lake People had a little bit bigger soundstage to it. And an interesting thing that I noticed is that like the imaging and the separation. On the XDuoo, the images were, you know, good, they're nice and holographic, but they were more pinpoint in there. Whereas the sonic images with the Lake People were a little bit wider. So if you heard a vocalist in front of you, it sounded like the radiating area of their voice was a little bit bigger than it was with the XDuoo, where it was just a little bit more pinpoint, okay? And I noticed that with the PS Vanes and all of that. The PS Vanes, again, kept most, like, was very tonally similar with the XDuoo and the G111 here, okay? And was the PS Vanes were more dynamic, okay, but just not to the level of the dynamics of the G111. Okay. The Ray tubes, when I put the Apos Ray tubes in the XDuoo and then compared to the G111, it's the same trends that I talked about in the tube rolling segment held up here. But so what happened there is, like, I think the spatial separation, again, was about on par with what the G111 is capable of, but that pinpoint nature of it came out even more with the Rays on the XDuoo as compared to the G111. So that difference in, like, the size of the sonic images is there. And then the consequence that I think that had is it sounded initially like the Ray tubes were offering a little bit better spatial separation than the G111 is. On listening closer, I'm going to call it a dead heat again. It's just like, I think there was a little bit of a psychoacoustic effect with that pinpoint nature of the imaging, making it sound like there was a little bit like enhanced space kind of between sonic images through the Ray tubes than the Lake People. Which approach is correct? That's up to you and all of that. You to decide. My opinion on the matter, it varies, right? Sometimes pinpoint imaging is preferred. Like a vocalist a distance away, the radiating area of the sound is mostly like mouth size, so the pinpoint is a little bit more realistic there. But if you have a bigger instrument that has just like a fuller body to it and a larger radiating area like a cello or something like that, I think the Lake People's approach is a little bit more realistic, especially when it's a little bit up close to you and that sort of thing, okay? Overall, I think the G111 might be just a hair better than the XDuoo across the board, but if it is not by much, okay? With either the PS Vane or the Ray tubes in there, even though the Rays, I should mention, also take like the signature again a little bit brighter, so you recover some of that rolled off top end that both the PS Vane tubes and the G111 have, okay? Whether you're using the PS Vanes or why am I drawing a blank on it now? Okay, because I just said it. The Apos Ray tubes. There we go. Okay, the XDuoo here, the TA20 Plus, is very, very, very close in overall performance. Okay, in terms of technical ability to the Lake People G111, just presentational differences mostly. And I think that says a lot about the XDuoo TA20 Plus because I've not heard a lot of amps really challenge the G111 outside of that shit Lyre Plus, okay? I think the Lyre Plus also can outperform this one just by a hair, especially with a nice tube in it, but that again takes the price up higher than this one and all of that. But for me to say that the TA20 Plus becomes very close in performance, okay, to the G111 Mark II, I think is high praise of the XDuoo because I really think a lot of this this Lake People amp here, and I've often said of it, like, this is the amp you think you're buying when you buy the topping A90 or A90D, okay? It's really good. The toppings are way overrated. This one is great. So this getting as close as it does, well done, XDuoo. All right. So I think at that point, we can wrap it up. So the TA20 Plus, hybrid tube design. You do get the tube flavor in the sound, okay, which is nice. You can roll tubes to kind of tweak some aspects of the sound as you like. It's balanced, so it can match to a lot of the DACs that are out there of similar price, and so system building is friendly. It is headphone friendly. You can drive a wide range of headphones on this thing. It has enough power to handle all but the most extreme of the power-hungry cases out there. Okay. It's a good buy. I enjoyed listening to this thing, and you know, I'll share a quick little anecdote here on a personal level. You know, as I reviewing this thing, prior to reviewing this piece here, I was you know, reviewing the FIO FT3, and it was, you know, that was pretty good. But right before that, I had the Yamaha YH5000 SE, which is very technically capable, but it has really odd tuning on it, and I just didn't really like it all that much. When I was able to plug like my HE1000 SE into this amp and just listen to music again, it was wonderful, right? It really brought me back and reminded me why I like doing this so much, because it really did a good job of connecting me to the music in a way that those, you know, like the listening through the Yamaha or all of that didn't, right? So I did enjoy listening to this. It is easy to recommend. I appreciate its system building flexibility. It has the one, you know, well, maybe 1.5 build annoyances of the power switch on the back and then the slightly sloppy volume knob. Those are really the biggest complaints that I have about it. Other than that, it's got a nice, relaxed, smooth sonic presentation to it that is very non-fatiguing and you can listen to for long periods of time. And again, it's system building and headphone friendly. So again, easy to recommend. So I will leave it there. I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the XDuoo TA20 Plus. Please like this video if you haven't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Leave a comment down below. Check out my PayPal and my Patreon so you can help support the channel. And as always, enjoy the music.